So let's dive into the first skill. The next six videos or the next five videos after this are all about skill development. And my intention for you is that by the end of this training, you just feel more empowered as a practitioner to be able to be like, I'm going to review my work and I'm going to review myself as a space holder and make sure that I am really implementing these things. I hope that they inspire you to continuously strive to be better. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Within the spectrum of um, being reasonable with ourselves, we don't want to like have these unrealistic expectations, but there's nothing wrong with us constantly checking in. And I think it's the safest thing that we can do is to check in with ourselves and be like, how was that session for me? How did that go for me? To get feedback from our clients and to be able to look at how we're holding space and make sure that we are really upholding some of these skills to make sure that our clients are having the best experience possible with us and the greatest transformation. So the first skill that I want to speak to is the skill of creating safety. Right. So this is probably the most important thing, or one of the most important things. They're all pretty important. But there are three specific areas of safety that I want to talk to today. And I want you to consider when I talk about each one, are you kind of making sure that this element of safety is being met within your practice? Now, the first one I'll speak to is just the foundations of physical and environmental safety. Now, this is more applicable if you are someone who works in person with your clients. So this could be one-on-one coaching in person. It could also be if you run like women's circles or if you host retreats. But it can also be applicable to, so many coaches and practitioners have mixed modalities under their belt, meaning that they might be a coach and a Reiki practitioner or a coach and a yoga teacher, or a coach and a breathwork facilitator. So there is always that element of like in-person work and hands-on touch usually, right? Now, physical and environmental safety just means like on one end of the spectrum, it's just basically being able to scan for hazards. Like it sounds so simple, but you'd be surprised at how many people don't do this. They book in a yoga retreat without checking it out first. They start to run a class in a yoga shala and they don't know where everything is. They, don't ask their students or clients when they come in, what do you need? Right? Something that a lot of people don't consider is that a lot of the time, the clients that we work with, they might have something called sensory processing sensitivity, which is also kind of referred to as being highly sensitive. Now, if someone is highly sensitive, they're going to be really deeply impacted by their environment, by their physical environment, what is around them, and what they can pick up on through their senses. So, as a practitioner, especially one who's trauma informed, we know how an environment, especially for a person who's had trauma, how an environment affects a highly sensitive person. And this means that we do and are aware of what is necessary in order to make that environment physically as comfortable as possible to ensure that our client's nervous system is in a state that they can actually receive the coaching or the healing or the work that we're about to do with them. If someone comes into an environment and their nervous system is already on edge, right? Because the lights are too bright or the music is too loud or they hate the smell of the incense you're burning or whatever is going on, what's going to be happening to their internal world? And are they even going to be able to be present with you? Highly likely the answer is no, because I'm sure, as you know, whenever there's something going on within you on a nervous system level, it's really hard to concentrate on things going on around you. Even think about just being hungry, for example. When we're really hungry and that like interoceptive connection of being hungry and like the feeling of it and the anxiety it brings and all of this stuff, if you get hangry like I do, then it's really hard. Like someone's talking to you and you can't concentrate because you're so hungry, or you're really easy to get irritable if you're driving and you're really hungry because of that feeling that you have. Now, this same thing is going to be going on for your clients if you're not aware of the environment. So just from a hazard perspective, obviously you want to make sure there are no trip hazards, no loose cords, like no fired hazards, like none of this stuff. Very simple, like occ health and safety type stuff. But from the consideration perspective, it's really important to check out your environment and try to make it feel as safe and warm and inviting as possible. And even going to the extent of asking your client when they come in, are the lights too bright for you? How does the environment feel for you? Is there anything that I can do to make this environment feel safer and more comfortable for you? Without you even realizing, the music, like I said before, it might be too loud or it might have a beat that feels like activating for your client. Some people have a really sensitive sense of smell, and certain like essential oils, especially if they're synthetic, and incense, it can feel really overwhelming and overpowering, causing sensory overwhelm for your clients. So being able to understand and like, turn down the lights or turn them off or get rid of the smell or turn down the music, or, offer a blanket for the mat or whatever it might be. We want them to feel safe in the environment that they are in. Okay, the second part of the physical and environmental safety, and although this is something that people should know, sometimes people forget, and I've seen them forget in action, which is why I bring this up, is if you are offering hands-on touch. So say if you are a breathwork facilitator and you will be physically touching your client's chest, for example, or you are a yoga teacher who will be doing adjustments or doing hands-on body during Shavasana, or if you're a Reiki practitioner, which obviously involves the hands, seeking permission from your client is so important, and letting them know the purpose of the hands-on touch. Where in the body will the hands be? Do they have any questions or feelings around that they would like to share? They may have boundaries as to where your hands go. So, for example, someone might be okay with hands on their shoulders, but not okay with hands on their belly or on their thighs or on their legs for whatever reason, right? It's up to us to seek permission, to not assume that we know everything, and to be able to work with our clients. The seeking of permission and the consent that we get from them builds rapport between us and them and enables them to feel like they are working with somebody who actually genuinely cares and respects them. So if you're not doing this, or if sometimes you forget, which sometimes we do, and that's okay, it's about remembering to always seek that consent and to think about the environmental and physical safety of your clients. Now, the second part of safety is what we call emotional safety. And emotional safety is very much around trauma-informed care and trauma-informed practice. What being trauma-informed means is that not only are you aware of all of the different types of trauma and what they mean for a person and how they can show up, but you're also aware of the different variables for a person which may cause trauma. So there are a myriad of different variables, including things like living in poverty, including like who is there to support, any kind of other factors of segregation that that person may have experienced, their childhood kind of environment, whether or not they had a disability, whether or not, there are so many different things that can come up as to like the factors or the variables that impact a person as to whether or not an event would be traumatic for them or not. Being highly sensitive is a variable, for example. So not only do you know all the different types of trauma, but you understand the variables and how those variables will impact a person. So then what are the thoughts, behaviors, symptoms that will show up physically, emotionally, and mentally for a person who may have experienced trauma. So you're looking at not only the macro things, but the micro things. We also understand, how does trauma still show up in our present day life? So what microaggressions still exist around us that may impact somebody? Now, when we can show up as a trauma-informed practitioner, what we are essentially doing is making sure that we are not putting our clients at risk for re-traumatization. A lot of coaching programs are not trauma-informed, which is one of the reasons why we created our certification, because it is one of the few that we know of that is actually properly trauma-informed and goes through all of these things so that a practitioner feels really knowledgeable and able to navigate and understand how they need to be and the safety they need to hold hold on an emotional level to prevent re-traumatization happening for their clients. Now, what do we mean by emotional safety and how can we mitigate this, right? So, emotional safety is the same thing as physical safety, where I feel safe in my body. This is like the client's capacity for their own emotional regulation and how they can be with their emotions, right? So, a lot of the time, what you will see when you work with your clients is that they may have a fear of their own emotions. They may have certain beliefs around emotions being bad or wrong in some way, especially if they are highly sensitive. They may think that being sensitive is bad or wrong. They may feel like when they're emotional, they're out of control. They may feel like their emotions control them. And when they get stuck in an emotional state, a heightened emotional state, they might feel as though they don't know how to get out of it, which can elicit and become a trigger in of itself, which can then cause that person to go into their traumatic kind of implicit memories or feel re-traumatized again, especially if the coach or the practitioner can't safely guide them through it. Now, something that we see a lot is that there is this like too deep, too fast, too soon kind of mentality that can go with coaching, where they dive into the trauma in the first session, or where they're like jumping into kind of, they have these beliefs that in order for a client to have a profound experience with them, it has to mean like some kind of big emotional purge or like, tears or these huge emotional releases. And that's actually not what is always needed. In fact, trauma-informed care prioritizes slow, safe, emotional healing. So the slower, the better. Not the faster, the better. Why is this? Because it's taken a person a really long time. Like if a person has experienced trauma of any capacity, they've lived with that trauma and the subsequent beliefs, behaviors, and actions for many, many, many years before they come to see you. If we just go straight into the wound and then we try to like open it up and whatever, they don't have yet the learned skills and behaviors for emotional regulation and nervous system regulation that they should have learned in childhood. So they're not going to know what to do with that. They can do an hour session with you and then leave the session feeling completely exposed and feeling extremely vulnerable and uncomfortable within their bodies. So actually, what we want to do is to be able to understand our clients, but equip them with the trust and confidence within themselves through us to be able to help them learn the skills of emotional and nervous system regulation. The safer they feel, the deeper we can go, right? So we want to make sure that they are safe and then we can peel off another layer. Are they safe enough? And then we can peel off another layer, right? Now, this is in us teaching them nervous system regulation tools and techniques, but it's also in the way that we guide them, right? So in trauma-informed care and in trauma-informed space holding, we really want to prioritize seeking informed consent, right? Is this okay with you that we explore this? Do you feel comfortable to go through this together? As well as permission seeking. Is that okay? Do you mind if we do this? We want to be able to check in and check out with our clients, right? If we notice that we're talking about something that's causing them to have a verbal or non-verbal kind of emotional reaction, it's up to us to pause the session and to say to them, hey, I'm noticing that this is going on, and I want to make sure that you feel safe enough to continue. What's coming up for you right now? And opening up that space for them to actually check in and say, actually, this feels really out of control for me, or I'm starting to feel like I'm experiencing panic, right? If we don't notice these cues and we don't tend to them, then we can't offer them the tools for regulation in the moment, which is essentially teaching them how to navigate these things later in their life, right? So there's always this like kind of back and forth, this like, if you look thinking of it from like a somatic perspective, like this titration that we're doing of like, okay, exposing a little bit, then implementing safety, exposing a little bit, then safety. We want to make sure our client is equipped to be able to navigate the emotions that Pandora's box will kind of open up, especially when we do get to the core of their trauma or their wounding, right? So that's emotional safety. We want to make sure that we're not re-traumatizing our clients in any way. Now, the last thing around safety is you. How safe are you, right? I want you to be able to think about, as a practitioner, are you a safe vessel? Yeah. What's going on in your life? How are your stress levels? Are you taking on way too many clients and not having enough downtime? Are you experiencing compassion fatigue or burnout? Do you have your own unresolved triggers or your own unresolved trauma that may come up within your practice? Are you operating within your scope of practice, right? If the answer is no, then it means that we as a vessel, as an energetic vessel, as a space that welcomes our client, we are not safe. And what happens when we are not safe is that what can come into the space is our own stuff, our own triggers, our own judgments, our own biases, and this can deeply affect the way our clients feel and how safe they feel and whether or not they actually trust us or not, right? So you've got to know and be responsible for yourself and know your own limitations and know like what do I need? Where are my boundaries as a practitioner? And how can I make sure that I am keeping myself safe and regulated? If you're not safe and regulated, then you cannot co-regulate with your client. It's impossible, right? If you're coming in not really being present, then you're not going to be actively listening. If you have stuff going on in your own life, then you're going to be distracted, right? Now, the kind of final thing I'll say about practitioner safety is that it's so important. And many coaches don't do this, but I really believe it's something that we need to be doing. And I'm pulling this, from my background as a psychotherapist, is that you need to be having, even if it's once a month, your own supervision or mentoring with a coach who you admire or respect, who can help to support you with your skills and broaden your own scope of practice. It's so, it's normal for us to not know everything. It's normal for us to come to case studies where we kind of don't know what to do, or we feel confused, or we need another set of eyes and ears on something. And this is where mentoring and supervision is so important because we're looking to someone who has more experience than us to help us to overcome something so that we're not doing it on our own. And this is what makes you a really skilled practitioner. Having your own therapist that is a personal therapist for you or your own coach for you is also really important to ensure that you're not just like bottling everything up and then bringing that energy into your client sessions. Okay, so to reiterate on today's lesson, it was the three pillars of safety. Number one being your physical and environmental safety. Number two, being that emotional safety. And number three, practitioner safety. So have a reflection or think about those and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.